Hey everyone, I am back. It's been a minute, but today I've got something special. So, Dehancer reached out to me recently, and by recently, I mean like a month or two ago. They wanted me to talk about Dehancer, go over it, and share my thoughts. I was trying to come up with a cool project for it and ended up with the following idea. Why not recolor grade some of my old projects with Dehancer? That way I can compare and contrast my own grades against what Dehancer gives you right out of the box. Now, before anybody calls me a sellout, I actually bought multiple licenses for Dehancer before they reached out. I got the video plugin license, the photo plugin license, and even got a second video plugin license. Not because I'm addicted, but because each license only gives you 2 seats, and at the time, I had 3 devices. Unregistering and re-registering would have burned through all my yearly activations, which is maybe about like 6 or 10, I can't remember. So trust me, I've paid for it, I've used it, and I love it. So I figured, why not? So here's the plan. I'll show you 3 examples of Dehancer in action. 2 will be in a non-color managed workflow, 1 with log raw footage and then 1 without. And then the last will be in a color managed workflow. Normally I stick to non-color managed, but I wanted to cover a few different workflows you might find yourself working in. And if there's time, I'll also give a quick look at the photo plugin and the phone app. All right, enough rambling, let's jump in. Before we dive in, let's talk node structures. In Resolve, it's normally recommended that you start and end with color space transform nodes or CST nodes. Place white balance, exposure, and color corrections between the 2. This gives you the most flexibility, especially when working in color spaces such as DaVinci Wide Gamut. Finally, applying sharpening and LUTs at the end. With Dehancer, the setup is similar, except the final node is Dehancer itself since it creates the final look. Any adjustments should be made before or beneath the Dehancer node. For noise reduction, place it under the Dehancer node, ideally before making any edits to your footage. Here's Dehancer's recommended node setup. It's similar to what I've described, but they provide detailed tutorials in their manual for both color managed and non-color managed workflows for different color spaces such as DaVinci Wide Gamut or Rec 709. However, I won't be covering this in this video. My workflow blends both approaches, starting with noise reduction, applying a CST, making corrections, sending the result to Dehancer, then finishing up with touch-ups like sharpening and applying any other additional nodes or LUTs as needed. On screen, I will provide the color spaces Dehancer supports. Now, you can apply this node structure in 3 ways. The first is at the per clip or at the timeline level. In my recent breakdowns, I've shown the timeline method where the timeline node holds the final look and all clips are adjusted to match its input, usually DaVinci Wide Gamut. The second method is using an adjustment layer, best when clips share the same exposure or environment, great for quick turnarounds like social media. And finally, the third is applying the structure to a compound node, similar to how you would per clip, but obviously grouped. Okay, so with this particular example, we are going to tweak it just a tiny bit. It still follows the same rules as my previous examples with setting up the node structure, except in this particular short film, there were a couple of clips in a vignette or montage format that don't need to be touched by the color grade. And so if I set Dehancer to the timeline node, it would apply those Dehancer effects to them. So all I did there is just move those timeline nodes into the post group nodes. So now only the clips inside the group will have those Dehancer changes, the look, the effects applied to them. Now I did move them into a V2 grouping simply because when I copied over the original timeline so that I could use Dehancer on the second version, I noticed that killing off all the nodes in the first version grouping killed them off for all timelines. I thought for some reason the groupings were going to get copied between timelines and they were going to be separate between the 2, but I was wrong. All timelines share all groupings, and so they were just put in a V2 for that reason. That way I can compare and contrast both versions. One weird thing that I noticed when I was working from the start, actually, from when I first got Dehancer up until now, was the weird blue tinting and like hueing of the footage whenever I do Rec 709 and I don't select use timeline option. It could simply just be me not knowing how to set it up. I know the manual talks about it. Maybe I'm not understanding it, but going directly from Rec 709 to Dehancer Rec 709 gives you this ugly, nasty, bluish hue tint. And I was able to offset this, or at least get it to a good starting point by bringing it in or treating it as Rec 709, or in this case, DaVinci Wide Gamut, and outputting it to use timeline, which is supposed to be Rec 709. So I don't know why setting Rec 709 by hand or manually just doesn't work, but That is how I got to get rid of that blue hue tint behavior that it was doing. But once I did it like that, I was at a good starting point. And as simple as that, I am able to get a really nice picture from the get-go from Dehancer. Granted, a lot of the settings are already punched in from a previous recording. If I was to plop down Dehancer, just default settings from the start, it's already at a great starting point. And from that point on, it's literally just adjusting your sliders and your options so that you get to the look that you want. So even though it looks really good now with my current settings, it didn't really take much to get to where I'm at from what the default Dehancer settings start out with. And I didn't really need to do any kind of adjustments to any clips other than maybe exposure here and there, fixing some vignetting from the indie filters, and maybe adding warmth. But besides that, there wasn't really much that needed to be done per clip or at the clip level. Everything was kind of ready to go from the start. Okay, so sorry if I am giving you this information really badly. I am trying my best to give you a very concise and condensed version of essentially like the manual and my process so that this isn't a 2-hour video. I don't claim to be a professional. I don't claim to know all the ins and outs of this software, but I did spend some time reading the manual, and I will try to quickly explain what each option in Dehancer does and what it's for. And I'll give you some of my opinions and I guess some of the tools and options that I used with Dehancer for this short film. So initially when the plugin is dropped in and you open it, I think by default it has quite a few options already open for you. And I think it goes based off of maybe the most used, such as like film grain, halation, bloom, and a few others, including input. And that's great. It's trying to open up what's probably used the most. But personally, for me, I would have liked only the input tab to be expanded while the rest of them are collapsed. I don't care to have them all open. I don't use them all the time. And I do have to go in one by one and collapse them all to really see like all my options so that I can go into the right one. But just like a small little thing for me that I wish there was some type of collapse all button or expand all. But yeah, that's sort of my only gripe with how I opened up Dehancer at first. With that being said, let's go ahead and quickly go over the options that are in Dehancer. So first we have our film profile. This is what's going to essentially give you your look. Dehancer provides film profile sample from real stocks. So you get all kinds of options from Kodak to Fuji to all sorts of other cool options. You also get a push and pull slider to control exposure. But yeah, it's just really to adjust it to your liking. You get Film Developer, which lets you emulate chemical film development. Just lets you adjust gamma, contrast, color separation, saturation. It's just like another tool to help you sort of color correct your image before you start. You also have Film Compression, which lets you compress highlights into midtones. It's supposed to mimic film's natural highlight roll-off. So again, it just lets you mess with your highlights. You also have Expand, which lets you manually set black and white points to fit your film profiles. It's really just to get your video at a good starting point. You also have your Print section, which lets you simulate different print stocks. You get like Cineon Log, Kodak 2383. You get a Kodak Glossy, and I think a Fujifilm. I think the standard for most films is like 2383. And I think that's usually what I stick to. The other profiles look good. I think I've used Fuji before, but I usually don't touch this too much, and I leave it at Kodak 2383. You also have the color head option, which lets you shift hues or split tone across shadows, midtones, and highlights. It's another way of color grading essentially through Dehancer, and it has magic behind it. You can make stuff cooler, warmer, etc. You also have film grain, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's supposed to emulate film grain. You get profiles from 8mm to 65mm, and you could choose the amount or the amplitude or the strength of the film grain. I'm like 50-50 on this. The film grain in Dehancer can be a little bit too powerful sometimes, even at low numbers like 10, 5. It can still be a bit too strong, and sometimes I'll leave it checked off and I'll just use whatever Resolve has. I'm pretty sure maybe it's too much for me because maybe it really is emulating lifelike film grain, and that's really what it looks like, but sometimes it looks like it's too much for me, so I'll just use something else for film grain. You also have the halation option, which gives you sort of like a haloing effect around highlights, typically around lights, and you can choose the intensity, how intense it is, and it looks pretty cool. It serves to kind of give your image a sort of like a vintage or old school feeling, maybe a dreamy feeling. a feeling of nostalgia. It's usually one of those types of options that I choose when I want a very stylized look. Bloom is sort of similar to halation, except you don't get that cool orange reddish haloing effect around highlights, but instead it disperses your highlights to give your image more of a dreamy, glowy, almost like a soft look. The best way to describe bloom here is that it sort of gives you like a pro mist filter look, like a glimmer glass look, as if you were to use one of those types of filters where it softens up your highlights, which in turn softens up your image. I didn't need it for this project, so I kept it off as I feel like it was a little bit too much. Film damage is pretty straightforward as well. It's supposed to add dust, scratches, hairs, and stains to mimic real life physical damage to film. It's more of a stylized look. You don't always need it. I don't always use it. In the past, I think I've always gone to like YouTube and looked for scratch overlays, and I like that there's a built-in function here where you can just apply it. You don't have to go searching or hunting for overlays that are in low or bad quality. It's all built into Dehancer. There's also film breath, which just kind of it sort of flickers your image to change in contrast, hue, and tint. It's really, again, it's like a stylized option. That's the kind of thing that you would see like maybe in old films. I even want to say like old westerns. I feel like that's where you see it prominently. And I want to say that maybe Fight Club has done it, but don't quote me on that. But yeah, it's supposed to just kind of flicker your image between tints, hues, and exposure, so it just kind of looks like maybe old film, or yeah, I really don't know what it's supposed to emulate, but it gives you that weird variation of colors as it plays along. It every few frames you'll see your image kind of flicker a different hue or a different color or contrast. Gate weave is supposed to simulate like film jitter when a film is transporting through a projector and you get sort of a shake. You see the shake more in like lower millimeter, like 8 millimeter. The higher you go, I think the less you can see it. But again, it's more of a stylized look. It's not really necessary unless you want to maybe emulate like a projector or something. You also have overscan, which adds a visible perforation, frame edges. It basically just gives you a nice cool little border of like a film strip. You get like everything from like Super 8 to Super 35. You get all kinds of options, and you can really tweak how big, how small the video fits in the frame, the exposure of the sprockets, whether they're focused or not. I mean, there's a lot of options there. And again, it's more of a stylized thing, but if you combine all three, like overscan, gate weave, film breath, and then film damage, you can look like a really old school film projector playing some type of old footage. And I think it's a cool combination of options or tools that could have been used in my short film moments in time where I needed to emulate like a projector playing old photo slides. I had to emulate it some other way. I forgot how, but I got it to work. But this would have made life much more simpler. You also have your vignette option, which is pretty straightforward as well. It just lets you darken your edges. I usually leave this off because not all my shots have the subject in frame, or at least centered. And so adding the same vignette across all frames wouldn't make sense unless you're shooting the exact same scene for all your clips. And I'll usually just select or set my vignette per clip, depending on what I want the viewer to focus on. You also have your monitor option, which lets you essentially slap on like a false color, like a diagram look to your image so that you can look at your exposure. It's also really cool to use it on like your favorite films, like frames from your favorite films, to see how shots were exposed on there. There's also a clipping indicator. I looked around. I couldn't see anything overexposed or clipping in my footage, so I don't see it, but if I find one, I'll throw one in there. Output basically controls the total amount of impact you see for Dehancer. So like if you want to see Dehancer's effects at 100%, you leave it at 100%. You can do halfways, or you can do a lot less. I don't know if 0 actually means 0. A lot of times 0 means not 0 in these options, but yeah, just basically how strong the effects of Dehancer are. If you want the full effects, you want half effect. The LUT generator is pretty straightforward. It just lets you export your look into a LUT, all with the exception of the effects such as like bloom, halation, film damage, film breath, all that stuff. So it's just a quick way of getting your look, sending it off, applying it to clips really easily. You also have options, which lets you choose how fast or how slow you want Dehancer to run, depending on how much resources you want it to take up. I usually leave mine on normal, fast. You also have a check profiles button that lets you download the latest profiles from Dehancer. The only thing I wish there was in the options section was maybe like a self-updater. I know if you want to get the latest Dehancer, you need to uninstall and reinstall the latest version. And I know there's a couple of plugins out there that let you essentially download and update all in one place without having to uninstall and reinstall. It's not a big deal. It's not even like that much of a hassle, but the convenience of one being there would be nice. But yeah, that wraps up all the options available in Dehancer. A lot of them are pretty nuanced. You're not ever going to need to use them all, but the fact that they're there is pretty nice. And if you only need to use the first half, I mean, you can get a really nice picture off of that from the get-go. It's pretty good. I like it. Okay, so here we are with our second example in a non-color managed project, but this time we're working with Blackmagic Raw. This was a spec project that I worked on that I actually ended up scrapping. I felt like it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, and I will reshoot this, but this serves as a good example for what Dehancer is capable of. So one major difference here is that these are all shot the same camera, and this is all in Blackmagic Raw. Everything for the most part is exposed exactly the same, with maybe an exception of 1 or 2 clips, but everything shares everything, so it's safe in this case to put everything on the timeline. And the fact that I know what camera I'm working with and what it was shot in, this is going to make Dehancer the first node that we work with, where if I turn it on, we're already getting a good look from the start, because our source, I honestly don't know what goes on in my brain sometimes. This should not be Rec 709. This should be Blackmagic Design, 4K film, boom. So there's that. You know, this might actually, oh, you know what happened? This is probably what happened when I updated. So everything I had selected beforehand was Blackmagic and 4K and all that. But I upgraded Dehancer before I essentially quote unquote finished this project. So I think that was the issue, because nothing changed. Because if I switched it to Rec 709, yeah. So I think that was my fault for upgrading too early. But I wanted to make sure I was at the most updated version of this. So yes, so everything looks exactly the same. It just for some reason didn't pick up on the input because I probably updated my plugin tool. And off of one node already, we're already looking really good. Finish it off with sharpness. The sharpness could come afterwards because it can also be kind of resource intensive, but all I did in the pre-group was add noise reduction, film grain, and I think I just added some warmth to the footage because it was too blue for me. So yeah, this should probably be like, I don't know, warm. So that's all it was. That's how beautiful it was. Boom, boom, boom. So 3 nodes again, and these are just pre-clips, pre-group clips. They still have individual clips themselves, which all I did was bring up the brightness on some of these. Yeah, I mean, I didn't do anything crazy here. Some of these probably didn't even need adjustments. Other than this, it was a little bit too dark. But yeah, this is as simple as this is. I can go over the timeline again. It's nothing crazy. I don't think I touched Dehancer too much here. I just did 250 daylight. I don't think I mess with film developer or film compression. I messed with expand. So yeah, expand did give me some good some really good exposure. I use Kodak 2383. I don't think I messed with the color head. Oh, I did. I actually used quite a bit of it here. So yeah, I just made it so that the white wasn't too yellowish. I wanted to balance it out a little bit. I don't think, I used my own film grain. I turned on halation, but I don't think there was anything there was no shots with like highlights for it to like halo, so I don't think I used that. I don't even think I used bloom. Yeah, this was like the complete opposite. I did everything but what I usually choose for it. No film damage, no film breath, no weave or overscan. I think I used, no, not even vignetting. So out of the box, this looks pretty nice. This would have been like a quick turnaround for a social media video, for a social media promo. But again, like I said, I'm not too happy with it. So I will be revisiting not this particular clip, but the reshoot when I do it later on. And maybe I could do a little video on that. But yeah, here's another example. I love it. It looks good. I didn't actually color grade it on my own to compare, but I wanted to show you how fast and easy you could do this with Dehancer. Okay, and on our final example for Dehancer video is we're working with a color managed project shot in Blackmagic RAW. And this example again is showing you color managed. So let's just quickly see what that looks like. So if we go into our timeline settings and we set our picture to non-color managed, this is what you'd be working with from the start. But again, because I want some variation and I want to show you guys how it all works. If you're working in a color managed, this is your starting point. And because I don't want to go clip by clip and putting them into groups, I want to show you guys how to do this as a single adjustment clip. We are going to add an adjustment clip. And you can add this quickly by going into effects, going to your toolbox, and then typing in adjustment. And you just plop it down and then make it as long as you need to. So here, I think I've already turned it on. So once I turn it on, you see that I think it already applied Dehancer. So if we go into our node settings, we are literally working with two nodes, Dehancer and then a sharpening node. So with Dehancer, I've already selected my camera, Blackmagic 4K film. I have added my film stock. I have not done anything with developer. I think I adjusted the film compression a bit, although you can't really see it here. Yeah, I messed a little bit with the black and white points because some of the footage was a little bit too dark. I think this was an example of one, and if not, it must have been somewhere else. I set my Kodak to 2383, which is beautiful. I don't think I messed with the color head. I turned on film grain. I don't think I added halation. I don't think anything here required halation, or it looked like it would work. Yeah, I didn't need that. I didn't need bloom either. So I really just wanted the film look for it, and obviously I didn't need any of these other stylized film damage and film breathing looks. And so it was as simple as that. I don't even, the clips themselves don't even have anything on them. And if we just turn off, we got essentially the Rec 709 that comes out of Blackmagic, and then what Film Dehancer gives me. So, it was kind of cool to see this. So up to you, however you like your footage to look, and you be the judge which of the two looks better. I personally am leaning towards Dehancer. I just cannot get those colors that I'm getting out of this. So yeah, that concludes those three examples. 2 non-color managed and 1 color managed using an adjustment clip. And then of course I could have just done a compound clip and then just applied those nodes to the compound clip itself. You know what? Let's just do it. So let's just go ahead and make this into a compound clip. How many nodes do we have here? We have 2. Boom. 1, 2. Copy. Pasta. Copy. Pasta. And now we can turn these off. We could turn this off. Obviously, it's going to get rid of the zoom. But you can see we are back at where we were, with all of them essentially grouped up as one clip. So there it is, 2 nodes. Now, if you like the look this software creates but lean more towards photography, Dehancer's got you covered. They offer a photo plugin that works with Photoshop and Lightroom, and it's also compatible with Affinity Photo and Capture One if you're not an Adobe user. Lightroom and Capture One will run the Lightroom version of the plugin, while Photoshop and Affinity Photo will use the Photoshop version. Setup is pretty straightforward. For most programs, the plugin shows up in your plugin section right away. The only exception is Capture One, which is a little bit less user-friendly. Once you got your photo ready to edit, you right-click on the image, go to Edit With, and then manually find the Dehancer app, either in your C drive on Windows or the Applications folder on Mac. And unfortunately, you have to repeat this step every time. Not sure if that's on Dehancer or just Capture One being quirky, but it definitely is an extra step. Once your photo opens, the interface is nearly identical to the video plugin, just slightly rearranged, especially when browsing film stocks. What's nice is that you get a small preview window on the left, so you can quickly reference your starting image. All the same sections and sliders are there, and they'll give you the results identical to the video plugin. For example, I'll set a few quick adjustments and hit OK. And the image that comes out looks beautiful, almost vintage with a dreamy quality. With Affinity Photo, the process is easier. The plugin shows up right where you expect it as long as you followed the instructions. And one feature I really like is it remembers your last used settings. So as you can see, I was able to apply the exact same look I used in Capture One to this new image without having to redo the sliders. Sure, you can save presets, but it's a nice little time saver if you're in a rush. Finally, if you dabble in both photo and video, there's the Dehancer mobile app. It's subscription-based with separate plans for photo only or photo and video. The interface is closer to the photo plugin than the video one, and honestly, it feels even more intuitive and organized. For example, my latest Instagram post was graded with Dehancer on my Fujifilm X-T5 on top of a Fujifilm recipe. Mixing Dehancer with recipes creates some really unique photos that make your images pop. So at the end of the day, you've got 3 flavors of Dehancer to choose from: video, photo, and mobile. In conclusion, Dehancer makes it incredibly easy to create a filmic, dreamy look with all the tools that you need in one place. No matter how you work, there's a version for you. Dehancer Video if you're video focused, Dehancer Photo if you're into photography, and the mobile app if you want a mix of both while on the go. I was actually planning to buy the iOS app back when one-time purchases was an option, but once it switched over to a subscription model, I held off because honestly, the last thing that I want is another subscription on my plate. That said, the price is so affordable that it's still an easy pick for when I'm traveling or don't have access to my main editing setup. If any of these sound interesting to you, you can use code Lino for 10% off of all Dehancer apps, except the iOS app. It's pretty cheap after all, so I get it. Using my code will help me and my channel out, but don't feel obligated to use it. And I want to remind you still that I am not a professional. I am working my way into this field, and so if I say anything incorrect, feel free to correct me down below. Anyways, thank you all for watching. I have more content on the way, and I'll catch you again on the next one.